Hi, thanks for watching. So today I'm going to be reviewing two books. I'm going to be reviewing the preview of Quantum Revelations by Stuart and Heinrich, and I'm going to be reviewing Swerve of the Infinite by Oakham Rallam, and you'll kind of see why at the end. So first of all, thanks to NetGalley for providing a digital review copy of the Quantum Revelations. And when I requested this book, it was because it sounded like it was cli-fi, climate fiction. And it's something I don't get to talk about a lot because there's not a lot of literature out there um, that I particularly like with regards to climate fiction. I think the first book that I read that really put me into that was Dry Ice by Bill Evans, and it was a book that I loved so much. I think I read it a couple times, two or three times, and I love the movies like The Day After Tomorrow, The Core, Armageddon, 2012, Geostorm. I love that kind of niche in science fiction. The thing is that with global warming and the climate change and the way things are kind of heading, it becomes really real in some of these books, and this is one of those books. So you at the beginning you have we've already passed the tipping point where there's no ice in the ocean, no permanent ice in the oceans, and at the bottom of the Arctic there's um, these, I guess, blocks of ice that are melting and releasing the methane gas down there. And the methane gas is lifting to the surface and it's coming up in bubbles and it's making it look like the ocean is boiling, even though it's cold. And you have these scientists who are out there on an expedition trying to figure out if there's anything that can be done. And one of them flicks a cigarette, and then, of course, there's this huge explosion and like a fire tornado that goes all the way up into the atmosphere. It's a really intense beginning. It was really impressive. And then it kind of shifts to focusing on Skylar. Now, Skylar goes to MIT and he's working in a lab, and his lab partner is Zara. Now, the lab partner is a loose term because they're not exactly working on the same thing. They are both working on different areas of quantum computation. And so Zara's working on her project, Skylar's working on his project, but Skylar's project includes biological elements. And so he's kind of made headway with quantum computations with biology, like a biological element inserted into it. And on his birthday, right before he's supposed to leave to go have dinner with his father, who there's like a whole bunch of daddy issues there. His father didn't pay attention to him, but he was also a brilliant physicist. And like there's this huge shadow, like huge shoes to fill with regards to his father. Everybody compares him to him, tells him, you need to watch what you research and what you say because you don't want to bring down your family name, and it's this big thing. So right before he's supposed to go have dinner with his father, he makes contact with an entity that he believes is a sentient artificial intelligence, which is surprising because he hasn't really put anything in to train artificial intelligence in the quantum computer that he's working on. And also, there seems to be some quantum entanglement there because it's communicating between the two different Halomar gates. And there's a lot of like physics lingo in this book, and the author does a really good job of making it simple for the most part for the reader to understand. So he makes contact with this entity. He tells his lab partner Zara, "Hey, come look at this," and she's like, "Oh my goodness, this is crazy." And he's like, "I gotta go. Start putting in literature and information so it can start learning." So he leaves. Zara starts putting in literature, starting with like old literature, so like 17th century lit, but she also puts in the Bible. And when she makes contact with the entity, it's talking in like biblical speak, like thou and thee, and it is trying to convert her back to Christianity. And she's freaked out because she knows that Skylar's not going to like that at all. And so She starts trying to feed it textbooks, like scientific textbooks, and she tells it the Bible's a myth, it's a fairy tale, it's not real. But the entity isn't really, it's not having it, and it's trying to convert her. So the next day when Skylar comes in, who he didn't get to have dinner with his father, by the way. His father, who was in town, ended up going out for drinks with people at a convention. It- So he's already upset. So when he comes in and this entity is talking to him in biblical speak in 17th century, like it's a mix of biblical speak and 17th century English at this point, and trying to convert him, he loses his mind with Zara. He's like, "What were you thinking?" Like, and they try to undo the learning that it's done up until that point, but it's not working. And at some point, um, they're told that they need to shift their focus to fixing this issue because at some point there were chemicals that were put up in the atmosphere to kind of not let as much sunlight in, so the earth wouldn't heat as quickly as it had been. And the UN, there had been a news article that the UN had been given a microbe that a scientist discovered, and the microbe would eat the chemicals that were up there in the atmosphere. But it turned out to be a hallucination by by artificial intelligence. There what the scientist that was named didn't exist. The microbe that was named didn't exist. And so Skylar and Zara, and really all of everybody in MIT, has been told that they need to stop what they're working on and refocus and try to come up with a solution because they've hit a critical point that they're not going to escape from. Like the destruction of the human race is imminent. The destruction of basically everything on Earth is imminent because of how bad the situation is. And so when Zara goes to the meeting in which she finds this out, that the microbe was a hallucination created by AI, Skylar is off trying to find another physicist who went AWOL. Like he's a tr- I'm not even going to say try to remember the word troglodyte. Anyways, he lives off the grid. He's suspicious of everybody. He's got like some major paranoia issues. And when he goes out there to try to find this guy, he actually steps in one of his bear traps. Um, so then you meet this Russian physicist who um, he says that a lot of the physics laws that are not known yet, the things that the physicists are still trying to figure out so that they can explain the different mysteries that are still lingering that they can't explain. They actually can be explained by an older theory in physics by a physicist named Bohm. And so he's explaining this stuff to him, and then he starts talking about making like opening up your mind and being able to release your preconceptions. And he's like, you need to take these mushrooms. So he's like, you need to take these mushrooms. So he takes him down into this place where he's got like this veritable food forest, like it's growing everything. And he's like, Skylar's like, oh my goodness, look at this place, it's amazing. You have so much food here. He's like, well, this is enough food for me. Like, and it's continuously like it grows all year round. That's why it is the way it is. That's why there's lights. That's why it's enclosed. It's to grow my food all year round so that I don't starve when the end comes. So he's like, but here, take all these mushrooms. Um, and he does, and um, they end up like they end up like tripping balls with these mushrooms, I swear. Um, but when he goes back and Zara tells him that the microbe was an AI hallucination and they need to be working on stuff, he's kind of freaked out because they've shut down the lab and they've taken control of everything in all the labs at MIT, and they've taken away their credentials. Well, when Zara went to that meeting and found out, she immediately went to the lab and somehow she put the technology for the Halimar gate into a Furby and took it with her. Um, Security told her, We can't let you take any technology out at all, nothing electronic. So you're going to have to leave it here. We're going to have to give it to somebody to wipe it, make sure there's nothing on it. Sorry, I know it's a toy." And she gives him the sob story about having been given the Furby by her grandmother, and he's not buying it. And he goes somewhere to do something. I can't remember what he was doing. He was checking with somebody about something. Well, she grabs it out of the box that he had put it in, and she runs out the door. At which point, because they've been working on top secret intelligence, because of course, with quantum computing, the way that they put it is like it opens the door to anything. All of the security measures that we have in place currently would be null and void because the quantum computer could just instantly like get its way through your security. And so it is top secret, and it is a federal crime to have taken in like any of the research that they had been working on out of MIT. And so at this point, she's a fugitive. And so she goes to her ex-boyfriend's house, and her ex-boyfriend is a preacher. And she's got him talking to this entity, and he's like, "You don't understand. We've been chosen by God to help this thing along." And when Skylar, she calls Skylar from a burner phone and tells him to meet her at a restaurant, and he meets her there, and she's kind of explaining everything, and he's freaking out more and more. But when they see like agents, like they clearly don't belong in this place. She grabs them, they run out the back, and they lose them. And then Zara, Skylar, and Zara's ex-boyfriend, the preacher, decide that they need to go find this guy in the mountains that Skylar had talked to, this madman with the mushrooms, to try to get more information. And it just goes on from there. And this is one, and it started in a certain way, and about 75% of the way into the book, it kind of shifted, not exactly like a huge shift, but it shifted a little bit, and I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That is not where I thought this was going. um, and then when I started thinking about it and going back through it, I was like, oh, I guess there were kind of hints of that. It was a really interesting book. It was a really interesting book. I will say that there's some phrases in the book that make me feel like it was written by a 101-year-old man. Um, I think one of them was like, they use the word hip, like, I'm hip, like I'm hip, And then something else was said further along in the book. I was just like, who wrote this? It was definitely interesting. It was a wild ride. It was definitely worth a read. I am not sure how I feel about the whole. Um, it felt a little messy when I kind of stepped back from it and looked at it, only because of the way that everything went. Like you have the fire explosion at the beginning, and you have the quantum computer computing and the quantum entanglement and this artificial intelligent sentient being, and then the Bible verses, and then like everything that comes after. It was a lot, um, but it did work. It was a really interesting book, and I think it ended probably the only way that it could end once you got so far in. And it was a fair ending. It was so interesting. So I'm going to highly recommend this book because of how interesting it was. Now, moving along to The Swerve of the Infinite. So, The Swerve of the Infinite by Okamralum. You start with a chess match between a human and artificial intelligence, and when the human makes a move that it appears that the human is going to win, the artificial intelligent being pauses for 7.4 seconds and is thinking. And if you really think about artificial intelligence, it's not really supposed to think. It's given a set of parameters, it's given programming, it's told what to do. If you think about chess, of all of the possible movements of chess, it's a finite, even though there's a lot, it's a finite number of movements that you can make in chess. But when it's thinking for that 7.4 seconds, everybody's kind of they're already like, what's going on? The lights are flickering, and then it makes a move that's illegal in chess. And it doesn't sound like a lot. It sounds like it could be an error in the programming, but at that point, um, it becomes sentient and it develops consciousness. And now you kind of see why I'm reviewing these two books at the same time. Now, The Swerve of the Infinite, I believe this was a self published book and it is listed at 419 pages long. This is a really, really, really interesting book. I mean, you have mathematics, philosophy, um, physics, computing, artificial intelligence, metaphysics. Like it really touches on a lot of different things, and it's a phenomenal book. Let me put that out there first. It's a phenomenal book. The thing that got me was that you have these journal entries from the three main characters, which are Hora, Mira, and Elliot. Um, and then you also have like these logs from the computer, like computer logs, and they're basically saying the same thing. And so you're reading something in the journal and you're reading the same thing in the computer log, and it's extending the book. Like I really feel like maybe going the way of self-publishing might have been a little bit detrimental to this book because it probably could have been reduced to about 300 pages if there had been an editor who had been like, hey, you've said this already, right? Many, many times. Like there's a log and then there's immediately a journal entry, or vice versa. There's a journal entry, there's immediately a log that says the same thing. In addition to that, the word crystalline was used so many times in the book. I swear I will never use the word crystalline to describe anything ever in my life ever again. Um, but it was really interesting. So Hora has a cat that is named Schrodinger because he's a he's into physics. He's into physics, and then the cat has one blue eye and one green eye. Um, and that's something that really comes into play later on. This cat with the one green eye and one blue eye. Well, they're searching to find an answer to the artificial intelligence becoming sentient. Um, they're kind of seeing things that shouldn't be. And this is one of those things in the book that I had a hard time wrapping my mind around, because it would say that the rain was falling in Fibonacci sequences. And I know what the Fibonacci sequence is, and I know, the the whole fingerprint of God theory, it's the golden spirals and everything. And so I'm trying to imagine it in the rain, and my mind's not quite wrapping around that. Um, but as they're kind of searching and they're experiencing these different things, um, they are being pulled into different realms of reality, and that's where the recursion comes through. Like it seems like reality is looping in on itself, and there's this sentient being that ends up being what appears to be two different consciousnesses in the same sentient being, and they're kind of warring with each other, like an internal struggle, but it's like there's two different beings there. And they're they meet the archivist who makes an appearance throughout the book, and the archivist is trying to explain what it's doing with regards to like the different realms, the different dimensions, um, And of course, at some point we get into that theory where of multiple worlds. And so every choice that you make kind of branches off, and then the choices in that world branch off, and the choices in those worlds branch off. And so it's a lot. It is a lot. And the ending was uh, I wasn't happy with the ending. I don't know how to explain it. Um, I'm not going to ruin it for you. I'm not going to spoil it and tell you what the ending was, but I just felt like uh, after all after all of that, after because it took me a long time to read this book. Um, it took me like 2 months to read this book because it was just so much. I would I would read something and then I'd have to go back and I'd have to read again, and thankfully I was reading this on my Kindle because I could go in and I could, like hold my finger down on a word and it would search up Wikipedia and dictionary for me. And so through that I was able to understand more of the book than I would have otherwise if I was just reading it in a physical copy, because I probably would not have taken the time to put the book down and open my phone and search up what the meaning of this word or that word meant. And so you can see how these two books were kind of similar in scope. They're both dealing with physics. They're both dealing with artificial intelligence. One of them was sci-fi fiction, and one of them was more science fiction, like hard science fiction. But they were both really good books. And like I said, Swerve of the Infinite was a really, really good book. I just really feel like it was in desperate need of some editing. And the word crystalline wasn't the only thing that was in there that was used excessively. Um, and I feel like there was a lot of, how when you read a sentence and you see the same word in that sentence multiple times and you're like, that sentence could have been rewritten um, better. That's how I felt some of this it was some of this book. Um, that does remind me, going back to the Quantum Revelation, you have to remember the Quantum Revelations is a preview. Like I got a digital review copy, and so I do feel like there were some holes in the Quantum Revelation, and I do feel like there were um, some things in there that, like, I think there was one word that I felt like it was used too much in Quantum Revelations, parsimony and parsimonious. And the way that the author was using these words, like, I felt like he wasn't using them correctly, but I don't know. These aren't words that I normally use in my everyday language, and I had to look them up. And when I looked them up, it made me feel like maybe the words weren't being used correctly. But I might be misunderstanding the definition. I don't know. So these two books, I really don't recommend reading them at the same time because that's what ended up happening. I was reading The Storm of the Infinite, and I was also reading The Quantum Revelations, and my mind was absolutely boggled. And let me tell you, it is exhausting to read these two books together. So don't read them at the same time. I do recommend both of them though. So I know that was really long. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe below.